And there is no greater warrior. She is our general, our Patty.
No, hardly. Yeah. Listen, thank you so much, Susan, and thank all of you for what you do every day to help women and children, families in our country. I'm going to be very brief because I have to run back, I have to vote, and I'm missing 2 or 3 meetings being here. But I'm here because I think it's critically important. And quite frankly, I'm beginning to feel too old, too tired, and probably too fat not to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. I tell you, I've had it. I spend 3/4 of my time in Congress fighting to hold on to what we won 20 years ago. It's everything is an effort to roll back, to roll back, to roll back. And we are 53% of the population, and if every member around this table got your organization to focus on the Equal Rights Amendment and to score it at election time, there's not a doubt in my mind that we can pass it. I really believe it. When you look at the polling, 99% of Americans believe in equal rights, and it's a value that we hold. It's like having a glass of water in the morning. Yet it's mainly financial interests that push back on it. When I talked to Ellie Smeal and others that were part of that great battle in the 70s, and we came so close, 35 states ratified it. We only needed 3 more. But even in that battle, they discriminated against us. They put a timeline on it, a limit on it. So we're coming back now with no limit on it. We're going to go out there and we're going to ratify it. Recently, I was in Seneca Falls. They were rededicating the church, the Wesleyan Church, where the Declaration of Sentiments came out. And I went up for that very inspirational time, and I was reading the writings of one of those women. They were so brilliant. They had 2 goals. First, to gain the right to vote, from which would come all other powers. And then secondly, to become enshrined in the Constitution. And one of them wrote, if we don't get our act together, we'll be back here 50 years later and still not have the Equal Rights Amendment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's now been 150 years. And, you know, I sit there and think, how can we be so intelligent, so accomplished, so good at what we do? Why can't we get this thing done? And that's because we're not focusing on it. Now, oftentimes we rate legislators on several things. Well, given the large group of issues that we work on as women organizations and groups that are dedicated to women, you know, they can find something they like. You know, they're against child abuse. You'll find something they can get off the hook. But if you really focused on, are you for equal rights and equal opportunity? And everybody will say, yes, I'm for equal rights and equal opportunity. Do you value equal rights and equal opportunity? Yes. Well, then go on the Equality Amendment, the Equal Rights Amendment. And we are now, because of the hard work of Patricia Roos and Bobby Francis, we are on a conference call every week on Thursday. We have a target list. We're going out, we're getting our co-sponsors. We're now at 184. And if we all got organized and focused on it and worked on it, there's not a doubt in my mind that we could make it happen, in addition to everything else we're doing. But it's really very, very important. This year, Justice Scalia came out and made the statement that women are not in the Constitution. And if a discrimination case came before the Supreme Court, he said he would not vote on the side of women. Well, do you need a roadmap? Do you need a plan? That's very clear. And so let's put women in the Constitution. And I think that it's a goal that's worth fighting for. And as I said, that 3/4 of my time in Congress is spent fighting to hold on to the successes that many of you around this table secured for women. And many of you, and I'll particularly mention Ellie Smeal and the Feminist Majority, and now, have been very effective in being called at the last minute and saying, get out and alert, we've got to stop this on the floor. But if we passed the Equal Rights Amendment, we wouldn't have to do that. Now, one of the ways that I've tried to pass it is by economic arguments, because I feel it's really an economic issue, and those that are opposed to it are opposed to it on an economic basis, whether they say it or not. And I've done a series of studies since I've been in Congress called New Look at the Glass Ceiling, which, and last Congress, when I was chair of the Joint Economic Committee, I did a series of reports on women in the workforce. And it's consistent. For the past 30 years, we've been stuck at 77 cents to the dollar. And really the variable is 40%. There's a 40% pay gap. But once they figure in reasons why there should be a pay gap, birth of a child, taking care of a sick parent, age, jobs, many, many different factors, it still comes out to a 20% unexplained gap. And everybody says, we don't know what it is. Well, I know what it is. I know it's discrimination. And it's still out there. How many of you have ever been in a job that you've been discriminated against? I tell you, when I was growing up, it was horrible. You're taking a job that a man should have. What are you doing here? You should be home. Why aren't you taking care of your kids? They even ran ads against me when I ran for Congress. Carolyn Maloney's leaving her kids. I mean, it just constant, sexist, terrible attacks. And I think that one of the reasons Hillary Clinton got so much support from women is that when she, I applaud her, I never thought a woman would be taken seriously for the presidency in my lifetime. She got 18 million cracks in that glass ceiling. And I think many of us, when she was unfairly attacked with sexist attacks, very much identified with how she was being treated. I was with her in New Hampshire, and they held up signs, go home and bake my sandwich, go home and iron my shirt. And I was thinking when I was there, if someone had said to President Obama, Senator Obama, you should go home and shine shoes, there would be an outrage in this country. They would say, how horrible, how could anyone say such a terrible thing? But to say that to a woman was like, okay, that's okay. And this is the First Lady, former First Lady, and a distinguished senator. And I was sitting there thinking, if that's what they're saying about her, what are they saying about the rest of us? And I think what was so inspiring about her race is that she was so successful and so accomplished, but at the same time, we still saw those sexist barriers that were out there and made it more difficult, whether you're working on the factory floor or in management or wherever you are. And I thought, really someone should write a book about that. The great achievements of women and still the sexism that's out there. Well, someone has. I've written a book called Rumors of Our Progress Have Been Greatly Exaggerated, Why Women's Lives Are Not Getting Any Easier. And I'm going to bring a free copy to all of you at your next month's meeting. But I hope also that you will go back to your membership and get them to vote to score the ERA, to join us on our weekly calls, to join us on our outreach, and let's just make it happen.
Yeah.
Just this weekend, someone told me about a study that just came out on seat belts. And it showed that the seat belt, this is why everything to me is deja vu. They said that the seatbelt studies were all done on men. Well, when I was elected in 1992, I came to Congress. Patricia Schroeder told me a story that all the clinical trials for heart disease were conducted on men, on male rats. They wouldn't even give us a female rat, much less respect. And so she had to organize this huge movement in Congress to say that women's diseases should have tests on women rats. And she was successful. Well, in the seatbelt case, they did all their tests on men. And now the studies show that more women are dying in car accidents than men because the seatbelts don't work on them. How many times do we have to do this? Now, if we had an equal rights amendment, they'd have to do the test on both. We wouldn't have to have a petition drive, which I'm going to begin, and demand that they do the studies on women too. I also issued a report that came out from the Joint Economic Committee last week on low-wage earners. And women now, we've made strides We are 49% of the workforce. We're still underpaid and overworked, but we are 59% of the low-wage workers. Even though our educational level has grown in the last 3 decades, women are now better educated than men. But it's still not translating out into equal pay for equal work. And as the great leader, Martin Luther King, said, that changing attitudes is among the most difficult things to do. Now, are we surprised that women are discriminated against if we can't even get people to say women should be treated equally in the Constitution? Are you surprised? And so I think that it's time for us to step up and just make this happen. And if you ever study our history of what other women went up against, this should be like a cakewalk for us. A young student came to see me the other day, and she had found a letter that Alice Paul, the author of the Equal Rights Amendment, and was the most radical of the leaders in our fight for our vote, had written to her mother from England. And she had heard that Alice Paul was a distant relative of my husband. She was his grandmother and Alice Paul were cousins. And so she knew I admired her, so she brought me the letter. I want to paraphrase what was in the letter. She says, "Dear Mom, we're in England with the Pancras sisters, and we're fighting for our rights. And when we went out to the police, and it was the day that I had been down there with Occupy Wall Street, and the police were very politely standing around watching." She said, so they weren't causing any fraction with the people. She said, "The police came out 5 rows deep to push us back from our demonstration. They came in with horses, and one of the horses fell on my colleague. Gratefully, she did not die." And then she said, "Mom, if I am arrested, I'll be in prison for a minimum of 6 months. So I'm not going to be able to come home." And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, wow. I mean, I grew up in demonstrations. I've never seen one like that, ever. And the people that have been arrested, it's for a day, it's for an hour. These ladies were force-fed and called insane, and we're ridiculed, but I mean, it's not like being put in prison and called insane. So I just feel that the obstacles that we confront are far less than any that our sisters that fought for our right to vote confronted. So this should be easy for us. And if we really joined hands and worked together, we could make this happen. If your organizations join votes, and I would love to get to the floor of the United States Congress, an Equal Rights Amendment, and let people show where they stand. I believe it would pass. Who wants to go back to their constituents and say, yes, I voted against women having equal rights. I voted against your mother, your daughter, your sister. That's my vote. And I believe if we got it to the floor with the requisite amount, we would win. And if we didn't, I think whoever went back to their districts would have a hard time getting reelected if the women in this country stood up just an hour a day working for something that is important as equality of opportunity for women. So I'm getting tired, It's just, the same battles over and over. The seatbelt battle is the same one that Schroeder fought 40 years ago. When are we going to say, let's stop this?
Now.
Let's be now. Okay, that's it. I'm going to give it back to Susan. I appreciate everything that you do, and I hope you will join us. Bobby Francis has really been organizing a lot of this with me as the chair, I believe, of this committee here, and Pat Roos. We wouldn't have passed the Violence Against Women Act without Pat. She's one of our best strategists. and of course Susan Scanlon, and now you're like the NRA. I've been fighting the NRA today because they got a gun bill on the floor. But what makes the NRA powerful is that they are across the country in everybody's district. They're even in my district. And I just have to tell you what they had on the floor today. We just did the rule. They have a concealed weapons deal. So that if Arizona decides that they want to give a concealed weapons permit in Arizona, then it would count in New York. Now, I had an amendment that said if you were a felon, you couldn't get the concealed weapons permit, because a lot of them act again, and that failed. They wouldn't even put an order that you check against the terrorist watch list, and that a known terrorist should not carry a concealed weapon. They wouldn't put that amendment in. I mean, it's an outrageous bill. And we will lose lives because of it. An urban area is not like a western field. It's an urban area and guns are dangerous. But the NRA is behind it, and they're very powerful because they're in everyone's district. They even come to mine and scream and yell at me at my town hall meetings. And so now it's the same way. You're in absolutely everyone's district across this country. And so if now would get their troops calling their Congress members and saying, this is important, why shouldn't we have equal opportunity? I think that you could be a critical player in making this happen, because all of us listen to our constituents more than anyone. But right now, I wish I could stay all day and listen to you, but I am missing a committee meeting, and also our votes are coming up. I just want to thank you. I hope you will consider this, and I hope that on your agenda will be equal rights, not an endorsement. Oh, I endorse it, although I would love you to do that. And I'd love to get from Susan a list of which organizations endorse it.
They can't be members unless they endorse it.
Oh, really? Oh my God, you're all endorsed. Well, will you put some skin in the game and put some work in it?
Yes.
And show American women we're working for them. I tell you, I believe it's totally economic. It's totally economic. And when you can pay someone less, then their retirement is less. And it's no wonder that the largest sector of poor in our country are older women. And so this is important. They legally discriminate against women in insurance policies. And I'll just give you one example. It comes up all the time. 9/11. I've never seen this country so united and determined as on 9/11. And we quickly moved to set up a victims' compensation fund to give some relief to the families that lost their loved ones because they went to work, sat down at their desk, and they were murdered innocently because they were Americans. Well, we set up a special master. His first report says, women should be compensated at least a third less than men because they're going to make less money over their lifetime for the same job. So this discrimination is being built into the law on every single level. Well, the minute I saw that, and the Now Legal Defense Fund and Pat and others got a look at that, we started our petition drive, our meetings, our letters, our legislation, and we changed it. But if we had an equal rights amendment, we wouldn't have to confront these fights, even on something as patriotic as 9/11. That's a true story. So I think if we don't stand up and make this an issue, no one else will. And all my times that I've been in Congress, everybody goes out and gives a speech. I'm for women's rights, I'm for women's rights. But when you close the door and you go in the back room and the fights are really on the floor, it's women that are fighting for women. And if we as leaders of some of the major organizations in our country are not going to stand up and make this a priority, no one else is. And no one else is going to give it to you because it's power. If they can get away with paying women a third less, even on their 9/11 compensation fund, which they didn't get away with because we changed it, but still we shouldn't have to fight these fights every other day. And I could sit here and give you 40 different examples, but I'm just giving you 2 from this week. This is just 2 from this week. And what we ought to do is have a time at this meeting every month where we find the outrage of the month and start publicizing it. My outrage of the week or the day is a seatbelt study. How outrageous! Women are dying because they wouldn't give us equal tests on the seatbelts. You know, what is this? So all I say is if we don't work together, it's not going to happen. And I really believe if all of us made this a priority, we could get it to the floor of the United States Congress this year for a vote. I really do believe it. So the future is up to you. And Bobby Francis and I and Pat can't do it alone, and Susan. We need all of you on that call, and all of you having some skin in the game. And I just ask you, what is more important than ensuring equal opportunity and rights for half the population of the United States?